My cell phone said, "Emergency alert, evacuate now." But the camp counselor took it away and said, "No phones during activities means no phones." The alert came through at 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon while I was standing knee-deep in Clearwater Lake during mandatory swim time. The sharp buzz vibrated against my thigh through the waterproof phone case I'd hidden in my swim trunk pocket. I pulled it out and saw the screen filled with red, "Emergency alert, wildfire, evacuate immediately, all areas west of Highway 93. I was reading it for the second time, trying to process what "all areas west of Highway 93 meant for Camp Ridgeline, when Counselor Derek's hand shot out and snatched the phone from me. "Nice try, Ethan," he said, with that condescending smirk he'd worn all week. "I know you tech addicts will use any excuse, but emergency alerts during screen-free week? Come on. No phones during activities means no phones. You'll get this back at the end of camp." He shoved my phone into the waterproof bag he wore around his waist with the other 6 phones he'd confiscated that day. I stood there in the cold water with my mouth open, trying to find words to explain that this wasn't about checking Instagram or texting my girlfriend. The alert was real. The phone had actually vibrated with that specific emergency tone I'd only heard during tornado drills back home in Missouri. But Derek was already wading back to shore, blowing his whistle at another kid who was swimming past the boundary buoys. I'd been at Camp Ridgeline for 6 days of a 2-week wilderness leadership program for high schoolers. The camp was in northern Montana, about 40 miles west of Kalispell, tucked into a valley surrounded by dense pine forest and mountains. My parents had paid $2,800 for me to spend 2 weeks disconnecting from technology and reconnecting with nature before my junior year started. The brochure had promised leadership development, outdoor skills, and character building. What it delivered was militant counselors who treated their "no phones during activities" policy like it was federal law. Derek was 24, a recent college graduate who'd been a counselor here for 3 summers and acted like he owned the place. He was the kind of guy who called everyone "bud" in a tone that made it sound like an insult and who loved enforcing rules just to remind you he had authority over you. The camp director, a middle-aged woman named Rita Vance who'd been running Camp Ridgeline for 15 years, backed up her counselors completely. She'd given a speech on our first day about how phones were poisoning young minds and how we'd thank her later for forcing us to disconnect. The other 23 kids in my group were spread out in the lake, some swimming, others just standing in the shallow water trying to avoid the cold. My friend Lucas, who'd gotten assigned the bunk next to mine, waded over, looking confused. "Did you just get your phone taken away?" he asked. "Dude, everyone knows Derek's insane about the phone thing. What were you thinking?" I explained about the emergency alert, and Lucas's expression changed from amused to concerned. "Wait, for real? Like an actual evacuation alert?" I nodded and glanced toward the shore where Derek was now helping the other counselor, a woman named Ashley, set up equipment for some team building exercise. Behind them, beyond the beach, I could see the forest stretching up into the mountains, and now that I was actually looking, I could see something that made my stomach drop. Smoke. Not heavy smoke, but a gray haze that I'd been vaguely aware of all day and had assumed was just regular mountain fog. Except fog didn't smell like that. The wind shifted slightly and I caught a whiff of something acrid and wrong. Burning wood mixed with something chemical. Lucas smelled it too because his nose wrinkled. "That's smoke, like actual fire smoke." He looked at me with wide eyes. "Your phone said evacuate?" We both started wading toward shore faster than we were supposed to during swim time. Derek's whistle shrieked immediately. "Ethan, Lucas, where do you think you're going? Swim time isn't over for another 20 minutes. I ignored him and kept moving. When I reached the beach, I walked directly up to Derek, water dripping from my swim trunks, my heart pounding. "You need to give me my phone back right now. That emergency alert was real. We need to check if the camp is in the evacuation zone." Derek's face hardened, and he stepped closer, using his height advantage to loom over me. "What I need is for you to get back in the water and finish swim time. What you need is to understand that when I say no phones during activities, I mean no phones. Period. I don't care if your phone says there's a fire on Mars. You're not getting it back until the end of camp." Ashley walked over, looking concerned. "What's going on?" she asked. She was younger than Derek, maybe 22, and had been noticeably less intense about enforcing rules. I explained again about the emergency alert and the smoke, and Ashley's gaze shifted to the mountains. She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her processing, actually thinking instead of just reacting. Derek, maybe we should check with Rita about this. That smoke does look... Derek cut her off. It's a controlled burn. The Rangers do them all the time out here. If there was an actual emergency, Rita would have been notified through official channels and she'd tell us, these kids will say anything to get their phones back. He pointed at me. Back in the water, now. Or you're doing dishes for the rest of camp. I didn't move. Call the Rangers then. Call someone and verify. But we need to know if we're supposed to evacuate. Derek's jaw clenched, and I saw his hand move toward the whistle around his neck, like he was about to blow it right in my face. I'm not calling anyone because there's nothing to call about. Get in the water. Lucas grabbed my arm. Come on, man. We'll figure it out later. He pulled me back toward the lake while whispering, if it's really bad, someone will come tell us, right? Like, the camp has to have emergency plans. I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe that adults in charge of 137 kids in the middle of the Montana wilderness had systems in place for this exact situation. But I kept thinking about my phone in Derek's waterproof bag and that red alert screen I'd only glimpsed for maybe 15 seconds before he grabbed it. Evacuate immediately. Those were the words I remembered clearly. Not, be prepared to evacuate, or evacuation possible. Immediately. The rest of swim time lasted forever. I kept looking at the mountains, watching the smoke get thicker. By 2:45, it was clearly visible, gray plumes rising above the tree line to the west, and the smell of burning had gotten strong enough that several other kids were commenting on it. Derek maintained that it was a controlled burn and kept forcing us through the swimming drills. At 3 Daxo, when swim time finally ended, we filed back to the cabins to change for the afternoon leadership simulation activity. I dried off and threw on jeans and a t-shirt, my mind racing. The camp had a landline phone in the main office. If I could get to it and call, who? 911? My parents? I wasn't even sure exactly where we were. I knew we were west of Kalispell, and that Highway 93 ran north-south somewhere east of here, but I didn't know our exact coordinates. Lucas came up to me as we were heading to the activity. My sister's a park ranger in Colorado, he said quietly. She told me that emergency alerts for wildfires are serious business. They don't send them unless there's immediate danger. We should tell Rita. We found Rita at the main lodge where she was setting up for the leadership simulation, which apparently involved us solving puzzles while blindfolded to build trust and communication skills. She was a short woman in her 50s, with gray hair pulled back in a perpetually tight bun and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. I approached her while Lucas stood behind me for moral support. Rita, I got an emergency alert on my phone about a wildfire evacuation. Derek took my phone, but I'm really worried that we need to be... Rita held up her hand, cutting me off mid-sentence. I heard about this from Derek. First of all, you know the rules about phones. You shouldn't have had it during activities in the first place. Second, I've been in contact with local authorities all day, and there is no evacuation order for this area. The fire you're smelling is about 15 miles west of us and is currently moving north, away from our location. We're perfectly safe. She said it with such confidence, such certainty, that I almost believed her. Almost. But my phone said, I started. Your phone probably picked up an alert meant for a different area. Cell service out here is spotty. These things happen. Now I need you to trust that I have the safety of this camp as my #1 priority. If there was any real danger, we would evacuate. But there isn't. So I need you to focus on the activities we have planned and stop worrying. She turned back to her puzzle setup, effectively dismissing me. Lucas and I exchanged looks. She said she's been in contact with authorities, Lucas said. Maybe it really is okay? I wanted to believe that too, but something felt off. Rita's confidence felt too practiced, too smooth, like she'd given that speech before. And more importantly, I couldn't shake the image of that alert. Evacuate immediately. Why would it say that if the fire was safely 15 miles away, moving in the wrong direction? The afternoon activity was torture. We were put into teams and given complicated knot-tying challenges while wearing blindfolds and could only communicate verbally. Under normal circumstances, it might have been interesting, but I spent the entire time distracted, listening to every sound from outside, trying to gauge if the smoke smell was getting stronger. Around 4:15, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Sirens. Faint in the distance, but definitely sirens. Emergency vehicles moving fast. Several other kids heard it too, because the chatter died down and we all froze, listening. Derek, who was monitoring our group, immediately spoke up. "That's probably just the fire department heading to that controlled burn we talked about. Perfectly normal. Stay focused on your activity." But his voice had a slight edge to it now, just a hint of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Ashley appeared in the doorway of the lodge looking pale. She motioned for Derek to come over, and they had a whispered conversation I couldn't hear. When Derek came back, he was trying very hard to look casual and failing. "Okay, everyone, we're going to cut this activity short. Rita wants everyone to gather in the dining hall for an early dinner. Let's head over there now, single file, calm and orderly." The way he said, calm and orderly, immediately made everyone not calm and not orderly. We filed out of the lodge, and I could immediately see why Ashley had looked scared. The smoke was dramatically worse. What had been a distant gray haze at Tugay was now a thick wall of dark smoke blanketing the western mountains, and I could see orange, actual flames visible on the ridge about 3 miles away, flickering through the trees. The wind had picked up too, blowing ash and the smell of burning directly into the camp. Several kids started talking at once, their voices pitching higher with anxiety. "Is that the fire? Oh my God, that's really close. Are we evacuating?" Derek was trying to herd everyone toward the dining hall, but his authority had evaporated. Kids were pulling out phones they'd been secretly hiding in their cabins, checking for service, calling their parents. I noticed Derek didn't even try to confiscate them anymore. We reached the dining hall where all 137 campers and the 10 staff members were gathering. Rita stood at the front of the room and waited for everyone to quiet down. When she spoke, her voice was still calm, still controlled, but I could see her hands gripping the podium white-knuckled. "Everyone, I want to assure you that we are perfectly safe. Yes, there is a wildfire in the area. Yes, it has gotten closer than we initially expected. But I have been in constant contact with the fire marshal, and we are not in the evacuation zone. The fire is moving northeast, away from our location. We are on the southeast side of the valley, which means we are not in its path." She pulled out a map and showed us the fire's trajectory, using a marker to draw arrows, showing how it was supposedly going away from us. It looked convincing. She was clearly trying to prevent panic, and for a lot of the kids, it worked. They started to relax, reassured by the map and Rita's confident tone. But something still felt wrong to me. I raised my hand. "Rita, if we're not in danger, why are there sirens? And why is the smoke getting worse?" Rita's smile tightened. "The sirens are emergency vehicles heading to evacuate areas that are in danger. As for the smoke, wind patterns can make it look worse than it is even when the fire is moving away. I promise you, we are safe. We're going to have an early dinner, and then we'll be doing evening activities in the dining hall instead of outside, just as a precaution. But there is no need to evacuate." She said it with such finality that asking more questions felt like I'd be the problem kid causing unnecessary panic. The dining hall erupted in relieved chatter as everyone lined up for food. I got in line mechanically, my stomach too knotted to feel hungry. Lucas appeared next to me. "Dude, I tried to call my parents, but there's no signal. My phone is showing 0 bars. Is yours working?" I felt my pockets and remembered with a sinking sensation that Derek still had my phone. I left the food line and went directly to where Derek was standing near the kitchen, talking with Ashley in low, urgent voices. They stopped when they saw me approach. "I need my phone back," I said. "Right now." Derek's expression hardened back into that authoritarian mask he wore. "Absolutely not. Just because there's a fire in the area doesn't mean the rules change. You'll get your phone at the end of camp." My hands balled into fists. "The emergency alert said evacuate immediately. I need to call my parents. I need to check if there are updates. You can't just keep my phone when there's an actual emergency." "There is no emergency here," Derek said through gritted teeth. "Rita has explained the situation. The fire is not a threat to this camp. You need to calm down and trust the adults in charge. Ashley put her hand on Derek's arm. Derek, maybe we should give the phones back just so they can contact their families. They're scared and… Derek shook off her hand. No, if we give the phones back, every kid in this camp is going to call their parents in hysterics, and then we'll have 137 parents trying to drive out here in a panic, which will actually create a dangerous situation. The phones stay confiscated. That's final. He walked away before I could argue further. I stood there shaking with frustration and fear. Ashley looked at me sympathetically. I'll talk to Rita again, she said quietly. I promise. But for now, please just try to eat something and stay calm. Freaking out won't help. She was right that freaking out wouldn't help, but neither would pretending everything was fine when my gut was screaming that we were in danger. At 5:30, the power went out. The dining hall had been lit by electric lights, even though it was still bright outside, and suddenly everything went dark except for the late afternoon sun coming through the windows. The chatter stopped immediately and was replaced by nervous silence. Rita's voice cut through the quiet. Everyone stay seated. This is just a precautionary power shutdown that happens sometimes when there are fires in the area. The fire department cuts power to certain grids to prevent electrical fires. It's actually a good safety measure. We have generators and flashlights, so we'll be fine. One of the other counselors started distributing flashlights from an emergency supply closet, but I noticed something that made my chest tighten. Through the dining hall windows, I could see vehicles on the road that ran past the camp. Lots of vehicles. Cars, trucks, even a school bus, all heading east away from the mountains. And they were moving fast. People were leaving the area. I pointed it out to Lucas. Those people are evacuating. Look at them. That's not normal traffic. Lucas watched the steady stream of vehicles for a moment. Maybe they're just being extra cautious? But his voice was uncertain. Another kid, a girl named Sophia from the cabin cluster next to ours, leaned over. My phone got a signal for like 30 seconds earlier, she whispered. I checked Twitter. People are saying the fire jumped the ridge and is moving way faster than predicted. The hashtag is Clearwater Fire. Apparently, it's already destroyed some houses on the west side of the valley. My heart started pounding faster. Did you see anything about Camp Ridgeline specifically? Sophia shook her head. My signal cut out before I could search. But Ethan, if the fire jumped the ridge and is moving faster than expected, then Rita's map showing it going away from us might be wrong. She was saying out loud what I'd been thinking but hadn't wanted to voice, that Rita was either misinformed or lying. At 6 by, another wave of emergency sirens passed by on the road. This time, even louder and more urgent. The dining hall went quiet again as everyone listened. Through the windows, I could see a police car go by with lights flashing, followed by a fire truck. They were heading east, away from the fire, but moving with the kind of speed that suggested urgency, not a controlled response. Rita had disappeared into her office about 20 minutes earlier. Now she emerged, and I could see immediately that something had changed. Her face was tight with stress, and she was no longer even pretending to smile. She walked to the front of the dining hall and held up her hands for attention. Everyone, I need you to listen carefully. We've received updated information from the fire marshal. The fire has changed direction due to unexpected wind shifts. We are now being asked to prepare for a possible evacuation. The dining hall exploded in noise. Kids shouting, some crying, everyone talking at once. Rita held up her hands again, trying to regain control. Please, calm down. This is a precautionary measure. We are not in immediate danger. We have plenty of time. We're going to do this in an organized, safe manner. All counselors, begin gathering your groups. Each camper needs to pack essential items only. Medication, ID, water bottle. Leave everything else. We'll be loading onto the camp buses within the hour. Derek appeared next to me suddenly and thrust my phone into my hands. Here, call your parents. Tell them we're evacuating and we'll drop you at the Kalispell Evacuation Center. Keep it brief. He moved down the line, handing phones back to the other kids he'd confiscated them from. His hands were shaking slightly. I turned on my phone with trembling fingers. The battery was at 31%. I had 2 bars of signal. My notifications were flooded with missed calls and texts from my parents, all increasingly frantic. The most recent text from my mom, sent at 5:48, said, News says fire is moving toward camp area. Get out now. Call me the second you can. I called her immediately. She answered before the first ring finished. Ethan! Oh, thank God. Are you okay? Are you out? We're evacuating now, I said. They just told us. We're packing and getting on buses. I could hear her crying. The news is showing footage, honey. The fire is moving so fast. They're saying it's already crossed the valley. You need to leave right now. Don't wait. Just get out. Her panic made mine worse. We're moving as fast as we can. The counselors are organizing everyone. I'll call you when we're on the bus. I hung up and immediately pulled up Twitter, searching for Clearwater fire. What I saw made my blood run cold. The tweets from the past hour were all variations of the same message. The fire had jumped multiple containment lines. It was moving at unprecedented speed, driven by high winds and dry conditions. Several small towns were being evacuated, and most recently, posted just 8 minutes ago, a local news reporter had tweeted, "Breaking. All areas west of Highway 93 now under mandatory evacuation. This includes Camp Ridgeline area. Officials say fire is moving faster than trucks can drive. If you're still in the area, leave now." I showed the tweet to Lucas. His face went gray. Moving faster than trucks can drive. That can't be right. Can it? I didn't know. I didn't want to know. We ran back to our cabin with the other guys from our group. The smoke outside was now thick enough that it hurt to breathe, and ash was falling like gray snow. The sunlight had taken on an orange, apocalyptic tinge. I could hear the fire now, not just see it. A distant roaring sound like a freight train or a waterfall coming from the western mountains. I threw my essential items into my backpack. Phone, charger, wallet, my inhaler for the asthma I'd had since childhood. One of the other counselors, a guy named Tim who'd always been quiet and reserved, appeared in the cabin doorway. "Buses are loading now. Everyone to the parking lot immediately. Leave your bags if they're not ready. Just go." We ran. The parking lot was chaos. 2 old school buses were parked with engines running. Kids were climbing on board, some crying, most just looking scared and confused. Rita was standing by the buses with a clipboard, trying to take attendance and organize loading. But it was falling apart. Kids were getting on whichever bus was closest, siblings were trying to stay together, counselors were shouting contradictory instructions. I got in line for the first bus behind Sophia and about 20 other kids. The line wasn't moving. I craned my neck to see what the holdup was and felt my stomach drop. Derek was at the front of the line, checking bags. He was still, even now, enforcing the camp's rule about essential items only and making kids leave behind anything he deemed unnecessary. A girl near the front was crying because Derek had made her leave her stuffed animal, which she'd apparently had since she was a baby. "Essential items only," Derek was shouting. "We have limited space. No toys, no souvenirs, nothing that isn't absolutely necessary." Lucas grabbed my arm. "Is he serious right now? We need to get on the bus like 5 minutes ago." I looked past the buses toward the mountains. The orange glow was no longer just on the distant ridge. It was closer, much closer. I could see flames in the trees maybe a mile away. The roar had gotten louder, and the smoke was now so thick that the bus's headlights were on even though the sun hadn't set. Ashley ran up to Derek, her face streaked with tears. "Derek, stop checking bags. We need to load now. The fire is right there." She pointed toward the flames. Derek barely glanced at the fire. "We have procedures, Ashley. We follow procedures, otherwise it's chaos." "It's already chaos," Ashley screamed. She physically pushed Derek aside and started rushing kids onto the bus. "Everyone on! Right now! Don't stop! Just get on!" Kids surged forward, pushing and shoving in their panic. I got shoved hard from behind and nearly fell. Lucas caught me, and we both scrambled up the bus steps. Inside, kids were packing into seats, 3 and 4, to a bench designed for 2. I found a spot near the back, and Lucas squeezed in next to me. Through the bus windows, I could see the second bus loading with the same chaotic urgency. Rita was doing a head count, but kids kept moving between the buses trying to find their friends. The driver of our bus, an older man with a gray beard who I'd seen driving supply runs earlier in the week, looked back at Rita through the open door. "Ma'am, we need to go. Now." Rita was still checking her clipboard. "I need to make sure everyone is accounted for. I have 137 campers and I need to verify." "We need to leave right now," the driver shouted. I can see the flames from here. If we wait any longer, we might not make it out. Rita looked up from her clipboard. Finally, really looked at the fire. I saw her face change. The professional mask cracked completely, and what was underneath was pure terror. She climbed onto our bus and grabbed the radio from the dashboard. Bus 2, this is Rita. We're leaving now. Follow us out. If anyone's not on board, they need to get on immediately. The second bus driver's voice crackled back. Copy that. We're ready. Our bus lurched into motion before Rita even sat down. Kids screamed and grabbed onto seats as the bus accelerated fast enough that several people fell. I grabbed the seat in front of me and watched through the window as Camp Ridgeline disappeared behind us. The bus took the dirt road that led out to the highway, moving faster than I'd ever seen a school bus move. Trees whipped past on either side, and through them, I could see orange. The fire was on both sides of the road now. We were driving through it. The heat was intense even inside the bus. Kids were crying and praying and calling their parents. My phone was down to 18% battery, but I called my mom again. We're on the bus, I said when she answered. We're driving out now. Thank God, she sobbed. Stay on the phone with me. Don't hang up. I need to know you're okay. I kept the phone to my ear and watched the nightmare outside. The fire was everywhere now, jumping from tree to tree faster than seemed possible. I could hear trees exploding as the heat caused sap to flash, boil, and burst the trunks. The bus swerved around a fallen tree that was fully engulfed in flames, close enough that I could feel the heat through the window. A branch still on fire fell onto the windshield, and the driver had to hit the wipers to push it off. This was what moving faster than trucks can drive meant. The fire wasn't following us, it was racing us, and I wasn't sure we were winning. The bus hit a pothole hard enough that everyone bounced in their seats. Someone in the front rows was screaming that we were all going to die. Rita was on the radio trying to stay in contact with the second bus. Bus 2, report status. Where are you? Static. Then, we're about a quarter mile behind you. Tree fell across the road after you passed. We had to back up and find another way around. Fire is on both sides. It's bad. Rita's voice went higher. Can you make it out? More static. We're trying. The driver of our bus took a turn too fast and kids slid into each other. My shoulder slammed into the window hard enough to hurt. Through the glass, I could see we were approaching the main highway, the road that would take us east toward Kalispell and safety. We just needed to make it to Highway 93, just a quarter mile more. The fire seemed to know we were escaping. A wall of flames suddenly appeared in front of us, crossing the road about 50 yards ahead. The driver swore and slammed on the brakes. The bus skidded to a stop, and kids screamed. Rita grabbed the radio. Bus 2, the road ahead is blocked by fire. We're looking for an alternate route. No response. Bus 2, do you copy? Still nothing. Just static. Rita's hand shook as she lowered the radio. The driver was already throwing the bus in reverse. There's a maintenance road about 200 yards back. It's rougher, but it connects to the highway farther north. We need to back up and take it. He reversed at a speed that was absolutely not safe, using just the mirrors to see through the smoke. Tree branches scraped against the sides of the bus with horrible screeching sounds. We passed the turnoff for the maintenance road, and the driver yanked the wheel, spinning us onto what was barely even a road. More like a dirt path through the forest. The bus bounced violently over rocks and roots. Kids were being thrown around despite holding onto seats. Someone threw up in the aisle. But we were moving away from the flames. For a moment, I thought we might actually make it. Then I heard a sound that made my heart stop. A crack like a gunshot, followed by a roar. Through the left windows, I saw a massive pine tree falling directly toward the bus. "Get down!" someone screamed. The tree hit the back left corner of the bus with tremendous force. Metal shrieked and glass shattered. The bus tilted dangerously to one side, but didn't flip. Kids were screaming. The emergency exit at the back had been crushed by the tree trunk. I could smell gasoline. The driver kept going, the bus now listing heavily to the left, metal dragging on the ground. We couldn't have been moving faster than 15 miles per hour, but we were moving. That's what mattered. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 5 minutes, we broke through the tree line, and I saw the most beautiful sight of my life. Highway 93. Empty asphalt stretching north and south. The fire was still visible behind us, But here on the highway, we were clear. The driver pulled onto the road and immediately accelerated. I watched the speedometer climb. 35, 45, 55. We were safe. We'd made it. I slumped in my seat, my whole body shaking with adrenaline crash. Lucas next to me was crying silently. Around us, kids were hugging each other or calling parents or just sitting in stunned silence. Rita was back on the radio. Bus 2, we've reached Highway 93. What's your status? She kept trying for several minutes while our bus drove north toward Kalispell. No response ever came. The second bus, carrying 68 kids and 3 counselors, never made it out. They'd gotten trapped on the same road we'd been on, blocked by falling trees and walls of flame. By the time firefighters were able to reach them 3 hours later, the bus had been completely consumed. Everyone on board died from smoke inhalation before the flames reached them. The youngest victim was 13. The oldest was Tim, the counselor who'd told us to run to the buses. He was 26. The aftermath was a media firestorm, appropriately enough. The story of Camp Ridgeline made national news. How a wilderness camp for teenagers had ignored evacuation warnings. How counselors had confiscated phones during an active emergency. How 68 children and 3 adults had died because adults in charge had prioritized rules over safety. My interview with Detective Raymond Cross of the Montana State Police came 3 days after the fire. He was investigating whether criminal negligence charges should be filed. I told him everything. The emergency alert at 217 that Derek had confiscated. Rita's insistence we were safe even as smoke filled the sky. Derek checking bags while flames approached. The 90-minute delay between when we should have evacuated and when we actually did. Detective Cross recorded everything and took notes in a leather-bound notebook. He was in his early 50s with kind eyes and a quiet voice that made you want to tell him the truth. The emergency alert you received, he said. It came through at 2:17 p.m., you said? Yes, it said evacuate immediately. And the counselor took your phone within how long? Maybe 30 seconds. A minute at most. Detective Cross made a note. The official evacuation order for that area was issued at 1:45 p.m. You should have received that alert within minutes. If your counselor had returned your phone and you'd shown the alert to the camp director, they would have had nearly 3 hours to evacuate in an organized manner. Instead, they waited until the fire was on top of them. He looked up from his notes. I'm going to be honest with you. This is one of the worst cases of institutional negligence I've seen in 32 years of law enforcement. The camp had multiple opportunities to evacuate safely and chose not to. The investigation expanded over the following weeks. What emerged was a pattern of negligence that went beyond just that day. An independent review by the National Park Service found that Camp Ridgeline had never conducted fire evacuation drills despite being in a high-risk wildfire zone. They had no emergency communication plan with local fire authorities. Rita had never even registered the camp's location with the County Emergency Management Office, which meant they weren't automatically included in evacuation notifications. The no phones during activities policy, which Rita had been so proud of, meant that 137 kids and 10 adults were completely cut off from emergency information for hours during a rapidly developing crisis. The civil lawsuits started within weeks. My parents hired an attorney named Gloria Vance, a specialist in wrongful death and negligence cases with 28 years of experience. Even though I'd survived, they sued on my behalf for negligence and emotional distress. Gloria explained that my case would be bundled with dozens of others in what would likely become one of the largest negligence settlements in Montana history. The criminal charges came next. In October, the state charged Rita Vance with 71 counts of criminally negligent homicide, 1 for each person who died. Derek faced charges of reckless endangerment for confiscating phones during the emergency. Ashley and the other counselors who'd argued for earlier evacuation were not charged, though they would be required to testify. The trial was set for the following spring. But before the trial even started, the media did something that no court could do. They destroyed Rita and Derek completely. Investigative journalists uncovered that Rita had been warned multiple times over the years by fire officials about the camp's inadequate safety measures. She'd ignored them all, more concerned with her screen-free wilderness experience brand than with actual safety. They found internal emails showing Derek had confiscated phones from kids during 2 previous fire scares in past summers. though those fires had never come as close as this one. One email from Derek to Rita said, "If we give in and let them have phones during emergencies, they'll fake emergencies constantly. We have to stand firm on the rules." That email, published by a national news outlet, went viral. Derek's photo was shared millions of times with captions calling him a murderer. He'd have to live with being the face of negligent authority for the rest of his life. In March, Rita pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. She stood in court, read a prepared apology that her lawyer had obviously written, and cried as victims' families shouted at her from the gallery. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison with possibility of parole after 7. Derek went to trial and was convicted of reckless endangerment. He got 3 years, ultimately serving 18 months. When he was released, he couldn't find employment anywhere. His name was too recognizable, too associated with death and incompetence. The civil settlements totaled $340 million, paid by the camp's insurance company and Rita's personal assets. Every family who lost a child received compensation, though no amount of money could replace what was lost. My family received $180,000 for my trauma and near-death experience. We donated half of it to a foundation established to improve emergency communication in wilderness camps. 5 years later, I'm in college studying emergency management. I want to work in disaster preparedness, helping organizations create better emergency plans so that what happened at Camp Ridgeline never happens again. I still have nightmares about the bus ride through the fire, about the tree hitting us, about the static on the radio when the second bus stopped responding. But mostly I think about that moment at 2:17 p.m. when I pulled out my phone and saw that red alert. The exact moment when we could have been saved if someone in authority had just listened. Rita said in her plea statement that she'd been trying to protect us from unnecessary panic. But in the end, her desperate need to maintain control and enforce her rules killed 71 people. She'd been so convinced that she knew better than the emergency alert system, better than the fire marshal, better than the terrified 16-year-old kid trying to show her his phone. My cell phone said, "Emergency alert, evacuate now," but the camp counselor took it away and said, "No phones during activities means no phones." Those words haunt me, because following that rule meant 68 kids never made it home. If you made it this far, you've earned it. Hit subscribe and let me know your thoughts below.